Maybe voting against the Civil Rights Act, which wasn't just about governmental discrimination, but public accommodations. The idea that people who provided services that were open to the public had to do so in a non-discriminatory fashion. Let me ask you a specific so that we don't get into the esoteric hypotheticals
There's 10 different titles, you know, to the Civil Rights Act, and 9 out of 10 deal with public institutions, and I'm absolutely in favor of. One deals with private institutions, and had I been around, I would have tried to modify that. But, you know, the other thing about legislation, and this is why it's a little hard to say exactly where you are sometimes, is that when you support 9 out of 10 things in a good piece of legislation, do you vote for it or against it? And I think sometimes those are difficult situations.
And we have never seen him since. That was Rand Paul 4 years ago when he was first running for Senate from Kentucky. He has since not only been elected to the United States Senate, he's now also considered a realistic candidate for the Republican nomination for president, but he has never again come back to this show. You want to see him lie? Because today, Senator Rand Paul gave a big speech. He got lots of press. And at that speech, he also did an interview with NBC's Casey Hunt, in which he looked right at her and he told a lie.
You noted in your speech that you support the Civil Rights Act, but specifically, do you think that private businesses should be allowed to discriminate based on race?
No.
So you've changed from when you said before you were concerned about that title?
Never said before.
So you're not concerned about any of the titles in the Civil Rights Act anymore? No. Okay.
That's not true. Rand Paul repeatedly, and not that long ago, and on tape, in multiple settings, has in fact insisted that there were parts of the Civil Rights Act that he was not down with. Specifically, the big part, the big part that made all the difference in the world that everybody remembers, the part where the law was changed to tell private businesses, like, say, lunch counters in the South, that if they wanted to serve the public as a private business, they no longer had the right to do so in a racially segregated manner. That is the part Senator Paul said he kind of wasn't down with.
Would you have voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964?
I like the Civil Rights Act in the sense that it ended discrimination in all public domains, and I'm all in favor of that.
But
you had to ask me the but. I don't like the idea of telling private business owners. I abhor racism. I think it's a bad business decision to ever exclude anybody from your restaurant. But at the same time, I do believe in private ownership. But I think there should be absolutely no discrimination in anything that gets any public funding. And that's most of what the Civil Rights Act was about, to my mind.
See, most of it he was okay with, but not all of it. Racism would be a bad business decision, but private ownership, you know, gives you certain rights. And Rand Paul didn't just admit that once accidentally to me on this show or another time accidentally to the editorial board of his hometown paper. Rand Paul made this point a lot on tape, over and over again. There's evidence. It's all in the public record.
But are you saying that had you been around at the time, you would have hoped that you would have marched with Martin Luther King but voted with Barry Goldwater against the 1964 Civil Rights Act?
Well, actually, I think it's confusing on a lot of cases with what actually was in the civil rights case, because, see, a lot of the things that actually were in the bill, I'm in favor of.
A lot of the things that were in the Civil Rights Act, I'm in favor of. A lot of them, but not all of them. This guy is going to run for president. This guy, in fact, already is plainly running for president. And what he's lying about here is part of his very recent political history. It's not invisible. It's not made up. It exists on the record. But for some reason, Rand Paul thinks if he says it's not there, it isn't there. It will become invisible by him insisting it's not really there. It's like, look, I'm covering my eyes so you can't see me. You can't see me. I'm not here. Peekaboo. I'm Rand Paul. I mean, it works on babies. Maybe it'll work on the United States of America. It kind of is working on the political press so far. I mean, the press that the senator gets is somewhat astonishing, given the way he talks about himself in plainly untrue ways. I mean, the headline that Rand Paul got in the New York Times just today, Rand Paul courting black support, backs changes in voting rights and criminal justice. Rand Paul, in speeches like this one he gave today, covered by the New York Times, gets a ton of national coverage. He declares himself to be a supporter, not just of voting rights for minorities, but specifically declares himself to be a supporter of the Voting Rights Act. He gets headlined as a supporter of the Voting Rights Act. He says he is a champion of the Voting Rights Act. But listen, with this guy, be more careful. Just because he says it is true about himself doesn't necessarily mean that it is true about him. I mean, look, there is actual legislation to reinstate the Voting Rights Act since the Supreme Court struck it down. This is not some hypothetical, esoteric, do I support it? You mean, do I clap for it? Do I cheer for it thing? He's an active legislator in the United States of America. So if you say, do you support reinstating the Voting Rights Act? There's a way to do that. There's legislation to do that. Senator Rand Paul is not on the record saying he supports that legislation. Still, though, getting the headlines, though, for being a supporter. Why does he get these headlines? I don't know. He says it's true about himself. If you check the record, it's not true about him.
I like the Civil Rights Act in the sense that it ended discrimination in all public domains, and I'm all in favor of that.
But
you had to ask me the but. I don't like the idea of telling private business owners. I abhor racism. I think it's a bad business decision to ever exclude anybody from your restaurant. But at the same time, I do believe in private ownership.
You noted in your speech that you support the Civil Rights Act, but specifically, do you think that private businesses should be allowed to discriminate based on race?
No.
So you've changed from when you said before you were concerned about that title?
Never said before.
No, I never said that. Yes, you did. And, Senator, you are lying about it. And you are using that lie, in part, as the basis of what appears to be a run for president of the United States. And you know what? If nothing else, that deserves a salute, right? That deserves a cheers for an almost sociopathic level of chutzpah like that.